Hey, it's Pastor Doug again, and I'm here to tell you another Jack tale. And I am excited about this one. This is called Jack and the Golden Key. It's one of my favorites, and I hope it becomes one of your favorites too. Now, it happened a long time ago when Jack and Will and Tom was a living with the mama way out in the woods. It'd been there where everybody was doing the chores that they normally do, but Jack got to hearing that there was an old witch up to no good, and so he didn't want to do part of his chores. See, he always had to go out into the woods and collect the wood for them to cook on and stuff like that, and he didn't want to do that no more. He was afraid he might run into that witch, and they might trap him. Well, he didn't mind going out in the woods if there was a bear or a pack of wolves or a wolverine or anything like that. But even a giant wouldn't be too bad, but he didn't want to have nothing to do with the witch. Why, they was always a plotting and a scheming on how to trapping somebody, and why, he didn't want to be that somebody. And so he got to where he just wouldn't go. His mamas finally said, well, I'll send you out there with Will and Tom, and they'll be able to protect you while you get your wood. Now, Will and Tom, they didn't want to have no part of it neither, but they went on with him. But it didn't last very long, because they'd be going out through the woods, and pretty sure enough, they'd step on an old piece of limb or something, and it'd crack, and when it did, they'd all jump up in the air and scared to death. It got to where they got so scared about things that none of them would go. And so Jack's mama said, well, Jack, we got to cook one way or another. And if you won't go out there and get us some firewood, I guess you'll just have to go on into town and get us some coal. And that's mighty heavy to be hauling back. Well, Jack thought about it, and he decided that's exactly what he'd do. He went on into town, and while he was in there getting up pretty much all the coal he could get into a sack and carry, because it was a heavy load for him to be pulling on, he heard that the king's daughter was a missing. It was his eldest daughter. Now, you might have heard about some of Jack's other daughters and his adventures up to this point, but I don't think you heard nothing about his eldest daughter. Why, she was the most beautiful of them all. She sure was gorgeous. Everybody that seen her's heart just would start to patter because she just looked so nice. But she was one of them girls that seemed like she was always wanting the most. Why, whenever she got something, she always had the finest clothes on, always the most beautiful jewelry, and her language was as if she'd gone to some great school somewhere. She was the most highest and finest that everyone had known about, but lots of folks didn't care for her high and mighty ways. It was probably her daddy's fault, because any time he gave her something, she always wanted more, and he didn't seem to mind it none. In fact, whenever he gave it to her, since he had lots to give, he'd just give her more. If he gave her one bracelet, she'd want two. If he gave her a dress, she'd want a jacket to match. Whatever he gave her, she just wasn't satisfied. She always seemed to be wanting more and adding more and having more and looking more, and why, it wasn't a good thing, and her daddy didn't realize what all of his a-giving was a-doing to her. Well, it just so happened that she'd gotten up early in the morning, and she'd got her horse together to go into a ride in the woods like she always did, and off she took. It was one of them beautiful days where the sun was a-coming into the dark part of the forest, and so she rode further and longer in than she normally would. And while she was a-stopping and a-catching her breath, why, she looked up on the hillside, and the sun glinted off of something that sparkled. Why, she wanted to know what it was. Might be some hidden treasure. And so she made her way up, and had to leave her horse at a point where she went on up further, and there was this great, big, huge, enormous tree. And right in the middle of that tree was this beautiful golden gate. And when she went up to it, the light shone in, and inside there were piles of silver coins and gold coins and jewels and treasures of all sorts. And she couldn't help herself. Why, she went right on inside that tree, and when she did, the gate slammed shut. Why, the king didn't think nothing about it until that evening whenever she didn't show up. And he got to be worried about her. And so he started to sending his men around trying to find her. Why, by then that old horse had shown up without her, so they knew she was out there somewheres. They lit up torches and they went on their way, and it just so happened by the flicker of that flame on the torch there glint a little light off a lock on that door that had appeared whenever the gate had shut on that tree. In fact, that was the only thing left on that tree, was this golden lock. Why, when the king's men got up there and looked at it and saw what was a gleaming, they didn't know what to think about it. And as they was a searching around trying to figure out what it might mean, there was a little old note they found. And that note was in that crooked old writing of that little old witch, and she had said, "Oh, you can't have to look no further. You found her, but there's only one key that'll unlock this particular lock. Try as you may, each one can try once, and if it works, she's yours, and if it don't, she's mine." Well, while the king's men was a-reading that note, they looked down, and sure enough, one of them saw a key right there. He knew that had to be it, and so he picked it up and put it in that golden lock, and when he turned it, it just disappeared right out of his hand. He couldn't believe it. Why, he just looked there, and then when he turned around to tell the other fellows what had happened, he noticed that there were keys here and there and seemed to be all over the place. Well, them other fellas said, "Well, I guess we ought to get another one." He reached down to get it, but every one he picked up just disappeared in his hand. And the other one said, "Oh, you done tried your luck. Somebody else is going to have to get her out." Each one of them tried to figure out what one they thought might be the right key, and picked it up and kind of tried it in that lock, but not a one of them would work. They rode on back after they'd all tried their luck, told the king of what was a-going on, and he couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe his girl had been trapped by the witch. And so he put out a decree that if there's anybody that could find the right key that could set his girl free, why, he would reward that fellow with just about anything he'd want. Everybody started to looking for the right key. And since they was all around, everyone found a key, but not anyone had any luck with the key. By the time that Jack got home and shared the story that night with his brothers, Tom and Will, why, Tom being the oldest and strongest, he decided that he'd get himself out the next day and he'd find the right key. When he got out to going, he hadn't gone very far till he was a-noticing keys everywhere. It seemed like they were in trees and bushes and under rocks, and he just didn't know which one might be the right one. And so he found himself an old rock to sit on, and as he did, and he was a-thinking about where a witch might hide a key that nobody could find it, at least not the right one, he was a-mulling it over, and up become a little trail was this old man. Why, that old man was carrying a great big bundle of firewood on his back, crept over as he could, and just barely getting along, looked like he was struggling awful hard. Tom looked up at him and thought, "Oh, there's the witch herself. Why, she's looking like a man, trying to trap me too. Oh no, she's not going to get me." And so he let out of there. He got down a little further and got to thinking again. He says, "Oh, I know where witch would hide it. A witch would hide a key like that nobody could find in the old bear's den. Why, nobody in their right mind would go in a bear's den looking for a key, so that's where I ought to go." Why, he got up his courage and he got down to where that old bear's den was. It was awful terrible dark. He was afraid that it might be a bear or something in there, and so his heart was a-pounding and his arms was a-going, and he was reaching out in front of him. As he got in there, it got so dark he couldn't see nothing. He reached out to see if he could find the wall, and he grabbed himself a big old bunch of fur, and he just froze. But fortunately, that old bear was a-taking a nap. He reached down and found down underneath it, and as he reached on the floor, he felt himself what seemed like a key. He grabbed hold of it and pulled it out. And when he looked at it, it was sure enough a golden key. And so he knew that was the right one. And he made his way on back to where that big old tree with the golden lock on it that had the princess on the inside. Why, he turned in that lock and it disappeared out of his hand. Now, by that time, the king's men had given up on trying to find the key. Why, they was using their pry bars and they was using their axes, but they couldn't chip it and they couldn't dent it and they couldn't do nothing to it. And so they finally did sort of give up, and they was just hoping that somebody might find the right key. Well, that night, whenever Tom told his tale, the wheels in Will's head began to turn like sometimes they do. And he was a-thinking where would the witch hide a key that nobody could find it. And he thought to himself, why, if I was hiding a key where nobody'd find it, I'd hide it up in the old horned owl's nest. Why, nobody's going to climb up that old dead tree, and ain't nobody going to stick their hand right up in that old hole where that old owl lives during the day. Why, if you woke it up, it'd just nearly tear off your whole arm. So nobody's ever going to do that. So that's the place where I ought to go look. And so he took off and found that old tree, and he started a climbing it up it. And as he did, he heard something down below. And when he noticed down there was that old man. He was rummaging around the bottom of the tree, getting up twigs and getting up branches and putting them up in a sack. And he just stood real still. And he thought to himself, oh, there she is. There's that witch herself. Why, she's here a-guarding her key. This gots to be the right place. I better be still and quiet. He watched that old man struggle to get that wood together. Watched him get that burden up on his back and just barely start to get away, but he wasn't making a noise. He wasn't about to get tricked. And so he just stood there so quiet and so still. And whenever that old man was out of the way, he started to move in a little more, made his way up closer to that hole. Why, he could hear the gentle breathing of that old owl asleeping in the day. He could feel the warmth of coming up out of that hole. He put his hand up inside real careful and slid it on down. And there in the bottom in the jumble of them old mice bones and everything else you found in an owl's nest, he felt something cold, and he knew exactly what it was. He brought his hand on up and out, and there was the most golden, beautiful key he'd ever seen in his whole days. Why, he knew that was the very one, so he put it in his pocket. He made his way on down that tree. He got himself and got right out there where that poor daughter of the king was, locked in that tree. He had knocked on it, and she had hollered out, oh, it's another one. Hurry up, hurry up. I've been in here days now, and I can't seem to get out. Oh, please, 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 I hope you have the right key. And so he put it in, and he turned it, and it disappeared in his hand. Why, Will went back that night just as disappointed as could be. And he told what had happened. And then they got to bugging Jack. Said, oh, Jack, you ought to go try it. And Jack says, oh, no, I'm not going out there. Both of you come across that witch, and why, you just lucky yourself. You're not trapped up somewhere, too. No, sirree. I mean, I feel sorry for that girl. I do. But I'm not about to get myself all caught up like that. And besides, what kind of key would I find? I don't know where to look for a golden key that might unlock it. Why, there are keys everywhere I go. I got to kick them out of the way just to get firewood in these days, and because I don't even want to go into town no more. But man, if that witch is out there, I don't want to get no more wood, so I guess I'll have to go in and get some more coal. And that's what he did. And as he was making his way into town, there along the road coming up the other way was this little old man. Sounded just like the same one his brothers had seen. And Jack knew that it could be the witch, but he looked at that old fella, and there he was, all crumpled over, carrying a big old sack with goods from the store in it, just barely making his way and not getting much progress. And Jack says, oh, I just felt so sorry for him. I just had to offer for help. And so he did. He says, oh, uncle, You look like you're all weighed down there with all that weight. I got all day to get to some coal for us at my house. Why don't I just carry that sack into you for your house?" And that old man says, "Oh, I'd like it. I'd like it. I sure would. Why don't you get over here and give me a hand?" So Jack got over there. He took off that sack, put it on Jack's back, and as Jack was straightening out, that little old man backed right up to him, put his back right next to that pack, grabbed hold of it, pulled up Jack and that pack on his back, and he took off right through the woods, running like a jackrabbit. He got all the way into his house. When he got inside that cabin and closed the door, it was dark and damp. Jack just knew he'd been tricked, knew he'd been caught. And the only thing he could think of was, well, what his mama had said. She said whenever it's dark and damp, you ought to get yourself a bit of a fire going to get yourself warmed up. And says, "Oh, hey, Uncle, I think I'll get us a fire in here to warm us up. Is that okay?" He reached around until he found that old fireplace. There was branches stacked up on it. He got them all kindled together, reached in his pocket and got out some steel and some flint that he had always carrying along with him, scratched him up a fire, and whenever it did and it got to glowing there by the flicker of that fire and the flames and the light, he looked over and there was that old man unrolling his hands around, coming right toward Jack with his old hands out. He reached them out right up to that fire and says, "Oh, that feels good. Oh, I hadn't had a good fire like that. So nobody is ever helping an old man like me these days. They always think something the worst about me. That's what they do. But not you, Jack. Why, you just showed me kindness all today. You helped me get my sack here at the house, and now you got me a good fire going. But oh, I'm not about to be in debt to a fella. No, sirree. Why, you helped me, and so I'm going to help you." And he pulled out a little pair of wooden shoes. Looked like they might go on a doll. He handed them to Jack and he says, "Here you go. You put them shoes down and wear them, and you learn to mind them, and they'll take you wherever you need to go." Jack didn't know what he was talking about, but when he set them on the ground, them shoes just grew to the right size. He stepped his foot right into them, and they felt so good and so comfortable. He'd never felt something so nice on his feet in all his days. Why, he started to walk in them after he told his old man thank you for sharing with him, and he said, "I don't know where to begin," so he figured he'd just go on back into town and get the coal. And things was going pretty good until them shoes started tightening up on his feet. Why, with every step they got tighter and tighter and tighter, and Jack just knew he'd been tricked again, and so they was hurting his feet awful terrible, but he knew he had to keep going, and pretty soon he couldn't bear it no more. He got on the ground and he tried to pry them off, but they wouldn't come. He got out his old knife and chipped at them, but it didn't do no good, and so he knew he had to go back to see that old man and get some help. And as he turned around and started taking steps, them shoes started getting looser and looser. And it was going real good until he passed an old deer trail, and as soon as he passed it, they started to tighten up again, and Jack stopped. He didn't want to get in a mess again. No, sirree. He didn't want them things getting all tied up on him. And so he went back a little bit. And as he went back, those shoes got loosened up. And so he started going different directions and taking a step out. And if them shoes even got just a tiny bit, barely a little bit tighter, he'd pull his foot back. Why, he went around and he went around and he went around until he found exactly where them shoes wanted him to go. And he learned to mind them shoes. And them shoes, he says, "Oh, I dearly do want to go get golden key so I can find and get that princess out." And them shoes took him where he needed to go. He went right on down through that old deer trail, followed it to an old horse trail that was coming out right toward the king's house. And as he just got out of the forest, there in the middle of the road was a golden key. Why, Jack had passed all kinds of keys to getting to that point, and he didn't worry about it, didn't think about it, but whenever he started to step past that key, why, them shoes started to tightening up. He knew them shoes was telling him which way to go, and so he was trying to figure it out, but it seemed every which way was tight. And that's when he realized them shoes was trying to tell him that that was the right key. So he picked it up and put it in his pocket, and as soon as he did, them shoes let him start going again. And they led him right on down to where that poor little old girl was trapped in that tree, and there was that big old golden lock sitting on it. Jack got that key out and put it in that lock and turned it. And when he did, that golden lock transformed into a golden gate that was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Why, he just pushed on the door and it opened to the inside, and he could see in from the light beams that shone down that day the princess. She was in there, and Jack was about to step in to go get her, and she said, "Oh, no, don't come in, don't come in. That's how I got trapped. The two of us will be in here." "No, no, no." And Jack says, "Oh, well, if I can't come in, then you ought to come on out. Your daddy's mighty worried about you, and so is everybody else. Now, you just get yourself on out here, and I'll get you on home." Why, that girl was about ready to get out, but whenever that light come in there, it lit up all that treasure again. Why, those coins glittered and those jewels were just bedazzling, and she saw all the things, and she just thought to herself, "Oh, if I could just take some of it back, why, I'd be even richer than my dear old dad. And if I was richer than dear old dad, why, everybody would have to start liking me like they like him." And so she filled up her pockets. But when she got to the opening, she couldn't go through it. There's something there that wouldn't let her get past. And so Jack says, "Oh, this is an easy one. You just got to empty your pockets. That's all you got to do. Leave all that treasure behind and you can get on out. I know this kind of a thing. You just need to do that." Why, and that girl emptied out her pockets, all except for one little old coin. She couldn't just bear to let it go. And so she had it in there, and she got up there, and she couldn't get out. And Jack says, "Oh, don't be fooling around. This is your chance. Get it all down. Get it all away so you can get out of here." And so that's what she did. She put that coin down, but she just couldn't bear the thought of leaving it behind. So she scooped up handfuls of it and throwed it at the door. But as soon as it hit where the opening was, it just disappeared. Oh, it was a terrible thing. And Jack saw what was going on, and he got a plan in his mind. Why, he said, "Why don't you just get up here real close to the door and throw some? Just one coin. That's probably all you need to do to test it. Get up here real close and throw it." And whenever she throwed it and her arm stuck out, Jack reached in and he grabbed her arm and gave a mighty tug. And she started to tumble right on out of there. And as she was coming forward with one hand, she reached back with the other, and she grabbed her a handful of them jewels, and when she did, why, that door come slinging shut. Why, it smashed right through that princess, and it turned her into a golden statue, half in and half out, arms stretched one and the other inside. She was a painful look as she was trying to get through, and Jack couldn't believe what a mess that he'd made. "Oh, my goodness, what am I going to do now? What am I going to tell her daddy? Oh, I need help. I need help. That's what I need help." The king's men who was still around in those areas come up there. They seen the princess half in and half out. They thought this was their chance. Why, they went to swinging with their axes and prying with their bars, but they couldn't dent it, couldn't chip it, couldn't move it. They got an old team of mules, and they got a rope on that poor girl, and they tried to tug her and pull her, but she didn't budge not a bit. Jack just looked at them shoes and says, "Oh, I need help. I need help. I need to be able to do something to help this poor girl. You helped me out before. You just get me where I need to be now." And so as he took a step, it was able to go. He went right out into the woods, into a dark part of it. He was kind of scared and looking around, didn't know what kind of help he might get. And sure enough, when he got out there, he noticed that little old man collecting him up some firewood to get on back to his house. Why, he said, "Hey, uncle, you helped me before. I was wondering if you could help me again. That poor girl, she's stuck inside and out. She's halfway through and is a golden statue. I don't know what to do." Why, that old man come up and says, Oh, Jack, you did what you could do. You sure did. You helped her all you could. Why, she's right there, and you know this because of what she wanted to do. And what she wants to do is the only way she'll ever get out. Not you, not nobody else. Why, you can open the door, but she's got to go through. She said, oh, ain't there anything I can do? Maybe something you can do? Maybe something you can give me? He says, oh, no, Jack, I can't change no spell on that tree. No, it's deep and dark and strong. I already helped you all I could, but I tell you what, I'll let you know that even though she's frozen as she is, her mind is still a-working and her ears are still a-hearing. And so you might take that into consideration. And I'll tell you what, I bet you them shoes will still help you out. So Jack said, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so he told them shoes, where do I need to go now? You helped me get some help, but I need some more. And them shoes led him as he minded them with every step right to the king's house, but not to the front, to the back. And as he got to the back, there was this beautiful porch, and on the porch was the king's daughters sitting there just marveling themselves and being happy and gay and checking around. He couldn't believe they so happy with their sister like she was. But when he got up there, he just hollered out, hey girls, I was here trying to help out your sister, and I just want to know what's going on. Why, they started to talking to him about their sister. Oh, and you know how girls are. They had a lot to say. Why, they talked about how she was the most beautiful of them all, and how whenever anybody's around, they'd always just look at her, and they'd always just see her. And Jack could tell they was a little jealous about it, and they had been. Why, they got to forming plots and plans their whole lives of getting people to look at them instead of her. And so they started to telling her that the only time people ever did look for her was because they just didn't think she was very pretty, and didn't think she had very good taste, and didn't think that she could talk very well. And so they was just a staring because she was such a strange person altogether. And so that's what she believed. And so she always wanted more and always tried to have the best because she thought that's what people were a-wanting. But the more she did it, to the delight of her sisters, made people like her less and less. And them girls had thought that she had got everything she deserved to stuck in that old tree like she was. And so Jack was thinking about it and hearing it. And he says, oh, wasn't there anything ever good about her? Didn't she ever do anything in her whole life right, except for trying to get people to look at her and like her like that? And them girls, not realizing they was giving away anything important, says, oh, when she was a little old girl, she used to sing too. Not only was she the most beautiful, but she could sing better than anyone else. And so when people would come up, they would look at her and not at us, and then she'd start to sing, and they'd never look our way at all. And so we got to telling her that the reason everybody was looking at her singing because she sounded like a wild beast. She might think that she was hearing something beautiful, but that's not what everybody else was hearing. No, it was a screeches and a roaring and all kinds of wild beasts shrieking, and that's why everybody was stopping and staring. And so she quit to singing, and so people quit to staying, and why, then we could shine a little bit ourselves. And Jack had heard enough, and so had them shoes. Why, they led Jack right to back where he was with that poor little old girl. And so he just leaned up on that statue of a girl and says, oh, I know you're stuck here and you can't go nowhere. Everybody's tried everything they can do, but I can't just leave you out here in the woods all by yourself. You don't mind if I just hang around and visit with you, do you? Well, of course, she couldn't say anything or do anything because there she was, stuck, still holding on to those things that had her there because she just couldn't bear to let them go. And Jack says, oh, I just guess I'll whittle a piece of wood here to pass the time. And Jack's a pretty good old whittler, and as he was starting to whittle on a piece of wood, he says, oh, my brother says I can't whittle nothing. Why, they tells me that all I'm good for is making toothpicks, and anybody can make a toothpick. And as he sat there a-whittling, why, he whittled the most beautiful likeness of that poor little old girl. Why, when you looked at it, there she was, one arm out and one arm in. The folds of her dress that were caught, everything about her. Why, it was the most beautiful wooden sculpture that anyone has seen in a long time, and Jack was just a-whittling it away. Why, he even had the pained expressions on her face. Got everything about her in that little old thing, and he was just playing with it and says, yeah, my brothers sure do know a lot about me. They know everything about me. They just do show, he showed it to her and said, yeah, they is right. I can't carve nothing but a toothpick, so I might as well not carve at all. And he just tossed it on the ground and put his pocket watch up and put his pocket knife in, and he says, I guess I'll get on for the night, and I'll come back and visit you tomorrow. And as he turned to go on his way, with them shoes a-leading him as he had minded them, he heard the most beautiful sound start to make. Why, that girl's golden lips began to whistle a tune. And from that whistle, then it turned into a voice, and she began to sing a song from when she was a little child that Jack hadn't heard in them hills in a long time. And as she began to sing, why, that gold just melted right off of her. It went right back into that tree and turned into that lock. And as it did, that lock just opened up, and there was a beautiful golden gate. And that girl dropped everything in her hand, and she stepped right out. And when she did, that tree just come back together, and lock and all went away. Why, she just stood there, and Jack couldn't believe it. He runned up and gave her a great big old hug. He says, oh, your daddy's going to be thrilled. Your daddy's going to be thrilled. And made his way and got him back. And she got back home, and there was a great celebration. And they say that ever after that, that king's daughter didn't dress up like she used to dress in the past. And she didn't worry about trying to get people to liking her. Why, in fact, they say that she started singing again, and everybody loved to hear her, but she wasn't interested in putting on great big old performances. They say she'd just sing for the fun of it. Why, she'd sing as she walked out in the woods, and the birds would sing along with her. They says that whenever she got to someone who was sad, she could sing to them and they'd get happy again. Whenever somebody was hurting and they'd lost something, why, she could sing to them a song that would encourage them. When she used that beautiful voice of hers to make people happy and to help people along, and she was just doing it because, well, that's who she was. And everybody noticed her then, both the beauty on the outside and the beauty on the in, but she didn't do it for that. They say she'd put on a performance every now and then, and people from all over would come. But she was doing it because she was just trying to be the best of the things that she had, and that's the way of that. Now, I tell you that story about Jack and the Golden Key because the good book tells us that sometimes there are traps in our lives, and we get caught up in them because we believe the lies that have been told about ourselves, and we aren't willing to be the person that God has created us to be. But the good book also says that with every temptation, God provides a way of escape. But it's up for us to find that way of escape and walk through that open door so that we're not ensnared by those traps that so easily entangle our whole lives. And that is the end of that.